Okay, so we planned on talking about Peter Pan,
Yes.
but so we could start with that.
And neither of us are terribly well prepared, but we can definitely get into Peter Pan.
Or do you want to introduce yourself first, maybe?
Yeah,
All right,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, do you have like this, do you have like a thing? Like does
Not really,
everyone
no,
have
no,
to
no.
answer like a question about themselves or anything like that?
No, not
Okay.
really. Well, I actually have a few questions that I started where I was like,
Oh, okay.
maybe I could ask people this if I run out of something to say. So you can answer these if you want. But so anyway, I'm here with my cousin Jonah, and we have the same style of hat.
Yes.
And also our cousin Chris has the same style of hat.
This is
too.
Granddaddy's hat.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Mhm.
nice.
Yeah.
That's even cooler.
It's
Mine
inherited.
is not. That's a lot cooler.
It's pretty sweet.
One of them though I know was, well, this would probably take it off in a different direction. But
yeah, go ahead.
I don't. It was. I just there's like certain questions I normally ask people, not even on my podcast. Like I just ask them in general.
Okay.
But one is, what's your favorite Disney movie?
Dang.
It's a big one.
That's a good question. Do we count Song of the South?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna go with Treasure Planet. I think Treasure Planet's probably my favorite.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just a magical movie. Sorry.
No, that was
This
great.
is starting us off
That was
in a weird
great.
direction.
No, I like that.
I think what works so well for me with Treasure Planet too is because like if you watch it, it's a technically like really beautiful looking movie.
Yeah.
And I loved it as a kid, so it's probably my top choice.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, man.
Is there a reason why, or just you like the story too, or
The
is it
story
just
the story is definitely part of
Yeah.
it. I used to really love Treasure Island just as a book. I used
Yeah.
to read that a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, so it kind of bled into Treasure Planet because it's got like the steampunk sci-fi
Yeah.
vibe with it.
It's cool.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect movie.
Yeah,
I like
it's
that
great.
one a lot.
I had never seen it till I think like 2 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
funny.
Yeah, my friend Craig, he said that was his favorite or something a while back, and I was like, I've actually never seen that movie before, so I had to watch it. But yeah, it was really cool because basically, yeah, it's a Treasure Island story except they're in space.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is perfect. It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. Then another one was, do you have a favorite Bible story or passage or?
Wow. I think that's changed a lot from like year to year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like there's one that I'm kind of fixed on. I think this year I've been really thinking a lot about the passage where we have Saul who goes to the medium and he like brings up Samuel. I think it's Samuel.
Yeah.
And like that one's been on my mind a lot, and I've read it and reread it a couple times. It's just such a weird, like,
Yeah.
bizarre, freaky kind of little tidbit, and I think it's really interesting too because like it's not like the movies where it's like, you know, someone comes back to life and they're like ooh and they're scary and you know
Yeah.
they're doing
Yeah.
like this kind of theatrical thing. In the Bible, it's like Samuel comes back and he's like, what the heck am I doing here, Saul? Like, why'd you bring me back? That's creeps me out a little bit.
Yeah,
you
he
know?
doesn't really seem happy about it.
No,
Yeah.
no, yeah.
Yeah. So, do you have any thoughts on that? Because that's always intrigued me too.
Yeah, I'm kind of mixed on it. The thing that I think is most important to me in this stage of life is sort of like the sort of relevancy of the fact that there is power in that medium, where it's like, okay, that medium actually did something.
Yeah,
Like,
isn't that crazy?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
like, if you like read about, you know, psychics or whatever, and you read about mediums today, it's like, okay, it's all fake. Everyone knows it's all fake, but it's like there is something to it, you
Yeah.
know, and it's really, especially because I'm doing some research on Antalis, and it's like it kind of loops back into that.
Okay,
where it's
yeah.
like, okay, it's a little close to home, which I think is good. And I've been researching a lot of those kind of passages and kind of
Yeah.
filling myself back up on that kind of research.
Is it
so.
like a form of necromancy or something? I never really understood that because she like calls him up and she says, I see a Elohim, right? Which is like a god, basically, or spirit coming up from the earth. But I think at first it's just her that sees it, right? I don't even remember. I'd have to look at it.
I don't remember either. I don't remember that kind of detail. Yeah, I need to reread it.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I was reading it in December because that's when I've really started doing a lot of research into Antalis and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And I do plan to do some sort of video or maybe like a mini documentary sort of a thing. Like it's just really small, self-budgeted, obviously, and something on that. And I've been doing a lot of research with that. Like I've been reading Witch World, which was her big one.
Yeah, I heard those are good. I haven't got.
I'm enjoying it so far.
That's good.
Yeah, halfway in, and I'm like, oh, this isn't so bad.
If you would have said the opposite, I didn't even think about that. I don't like it.
It kind of sucks.
Yeah.
No, it's actually pretty. It's her prose are really good.
Okay.
Her prose are really good, and it's a very cozy kind of read.
Okay.
You know, where it's got some adventure, and then
Yeah.
it's just kind of fantastic and fanciful, and so it's really cool.
How many books of those are?
Ooh,
'Cause there's a lot, right?
There's a
In
lot
just
of
the Witch
them.
World series, I thought there was
Yes.
like 10 or something, right?
I think there might be more. She also
Okay.
did some partnerships. So one of the things that she did, I guess we should back up just a second and say this is Aunt Alice
Oh, yeah.
Norton. This is Andre Norton.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah, since we're kind of going this
we're
direction.
going
I
in
guess
this
now.
direction anyways.
Yeah.
So Aunt Alice was, obviously our relative, and it was a really renowned writer. So like she was really good, and she did a lot of pulp, so fantasy, sci-fi. She started writing when she was, really seriously writing when she was in her 20s and published really early on and started making a name for herself, and then eventually was able to do it full time, and it was pretty awesome. Notable things she's written, of course, is the Witch World series, which is the one we're talking about, and she also wrote Beastmaster, which became a movie.
Yeah.
Which I saw the movie like years ago. I don't remember anything about it. So have you seen it? Is it any good?
I haven't. I thought they even made a TV show.
Oh, did they?
Thought,
Okay.
But I haven't seen. I actually bought the Beastmaster movie off Amazon because I saw it for DVD.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, but I haven't watched it yet. Like I literally just got it. I think it was sometime last year. Then I just forgot all about it. So
We need to check it out. You and I need to sit down and watch it, and we'll trade notes.
We could do another podcast.
I think we
and critique
should.
That one,
I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah,
I
that'd be
heard.
good.
Okay, so do you know if this is true? I had heard that she wrote The Dark Crystal, but then that when they made a movie of that, they changed her ending and she didn't like it, so she wanted her name taken off of it. And I'm always like, is that? I don't know if I don't even remember who I heard that from, so I don't know if that was true.
If that was true, it wouldn't surprise me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because she wrote so much other stuff.
She wrote hundreds of books. Like she was so prolific.
It's insane. I don't know how she did that. Yeah.
Well, part
Witchcraft.
It's witchcraft. Part of it is because she wrote in a pulp genre, which means that like a lot of it is very digestible kind of story. So it's very easy to it's not terribly complicated. Like there's not a whole lot to it. It's very easily sort of written and digestible. Which I think is another thing that Stephen King sort of does as well, and I think that's why he writes so quickly. That and probably some speed or whatever he's taking.
Okay.
It probably helps.
The drugs.
The drugs probably
drugs.
help. But yeah, it's sort of like that kind of pulpy writing, which I think does lend itself to being written faster.
Okay.
So that helps a lot.
Yeah.
Not that I like know a whole lot about that, but
You've written some.
I've written. Yeah. We've written something, but
yeah. You got a book, right?
we got a couple of things that are in the works. So I have the big book that I've been working on for 5 years.
Yeah.
Which is a freaking awful long time.
That doesn't seem long to me.
It feels like forever to me because I'm
bet.
like every year I'm like, this is it. This is the year I want to have this finished now. And it's like something else happens and I'm like, okay, I got to go back and got to retry. But I think this is actually the last time I'm rewriting this book. So it's a fantasy book, and that was kind of my mistake. I think if there's anyone who's interested in writing fantasy, start with something easier. Start with like adventure, real world, something where you don't have to world build, because that's what takes like forever.
I see. Okay.
And then the reason I started with fantasy is because I read The Lord of the Rings in high school. Really liked it, and then when I was in college, I took a class on medieval literature. And when I was taking that class, I was also taking like this like theology kind of stuff. So I was learning about like Hebrew culture and ancient language and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, this would make a great fantasy. So I just smashed that all together and I started writing a book.
Did you have to do a lot of world building though, or were you kind of have to do that in fantasy? Okay.
I don't think you necessarily have to. I think it kind of turned into its own sort of monster. By the way, if you need to like adjust your mic, you can like move that around just to get comfortable with it. We're back.
All right. The book.
The book. Okay, so yes, world building is tough. Don't do it. That's
Not for the first book.
not
at
for the
least,
first book. Start with something easy. I do have a second project that I'm working on pretty seriously. That I'm hoping to self-publish. So the fantasy thing I'm trying to get traditionally published.
Okay.
And then, so it may be like 2 or 3 more years before anyone ever gets to anyone actually gets to read it. So
How big is it?
it's not as long as you would think. When it's done, it's going to be about 160,000 words.
I don't know what that is. Like how many pages?
So so.
Can you give me a measurement? Is it
about
like an inch thick?
You're probably looking about 350 pages, maybe.
That's a lot of writing.
It depends on your format. Yeah, it's not too bad. So I was trying to think of something to compare it to, but yeah, it's pretty good. So that's probably the big thing I'm working on. I'm actually gonna be hopefully looking for an agent probably in the next couple months, but we'll see how that goes.
Did you get a teaser? What's it about?
Yeah, so the story is about it's a little Pulp Fiction-y. It's got like the sort of interwoven narratives, but it's about a world where there used to be these gods that ruled over humanity. And then the gods betrayed each other, and so they've disappeared. They've either killed each other or they've fled into the underworld.
That happens.
Mankind has been left to their own devices. And then about 1,000 years later, this young girl inherits the powers of one of the gods, and nobody knows why. And so things are happening, war is breaking out. It's going to be a lot of fun. So it's like, it's that kind of stuff. Yeah. So
That sounds really cool.
yeah. Oh, it'll be good.
Nice. Is it like would you describe it as dark or no? Or
Oh yeah. It's
okay.
it's
I like that answer.
yeah.
Oh,
So that was the thing that I learned probably. That's probably the biggest lesson I learned writing this book, because I've written it. This is the 5th time I've written it all the way through.
Yeah.
I've learned that that's like one of the things too, is like writing is rewriting. So it's like you write something down and you go, okay, what do I need to edit? You edit through it, you mark up everything, and then you rewrite everything. You don't just like pick at it.
Okay.
Because if you pick at it and it's not, you're not going to get anywhere fast enough. So you need to actually rewrite the thing. So this is my 5th time editing all the way through it. And what I found in this 5th time is like, I found that I'm very good at horror and I'm terrible at fantasy. So I'm writing it as though it's a horror.
That sounds fun. Though.
Yeah. Oh, it's got some spooky spots in it. So
You don't get many. I can't think of many horror fantasies. Like, I mean, I guess there are probably a lot out there.
I don't know. So Game of Thrones, the show, definitely skirted on it with some spots.
Okay. Yeah.
And it had some really good horror parts in it. And then I think there's a couple of shows that sort of like to do that. Like they're trying to sort of feed on that sort of horror bent.
Yeah.
The thing is with most of these books is that the books weren't originally written that way. And so when they try to make a show of it, it's kind of a little off maybe.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of like The Wheel of Time, which just came out, where it's like they tried to do kind of a horror sort of flavor.
Couldn't really tell. I watched like the first 2 episodes. No, it was more than that. Like probably 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And then it didn't feel very horror-ish to me.
They had a couple of sort of, I guess devices would probably be the right word, but it's like, you got these characters that are falling into darkness. So you have one who's like submitting to this disease of insanity. And so you get a lot of sort of like psychological horror with that. Yeah. And then you have the creatures, I forget what they're called. They had some dumb name.
Yeah.
What are they called?
Either. I don't know.
I don't mean dumb. I mean kind of dumb, but whatever their name was. The orcs, the aren't orcs.
Yeah.
Whatever those were.
The monster guys, yeah.
The monsters, they had some sort of like some gore and stuff involved with them whenever they come on, and that's pretty scary stuff. But
yeah.
It feels out of place a little bit to me, where it's like, I don't know. When I was watching, I'm like, is this really necessary to have this kind of gore in here? I don't know.
Yeah, the movie, because the show kind of felt almost light to me.
It did,
like,
yes.
Kind of like it would be okay or fit for like kids to watch or something that are young. Well, not like real young, but
yeah, teenagers, 13, 14.
Yeah, it didn't feel
Totally.
like Walking Dead or anything. So I'm like,
Yes, yeah. I think thematically it was light, which I think is why it didn't seem to be justified. But
Yeah.
like again, it's not really my thing. I've not read the books. Like I don't know anything about this
Yeah, that's
about the
true.
show necessarily. I just thought the show kind of
Yeah.
felt a little out of place with that kind of stuff. But
yeah.
yes, it's not. I don't think it's done terribly often, but hopefully it'll take. We'll see.
Yeah.
I think it'll be marketable.
I think
so
it sounds cool to me. I like the premise too. It actually kind of reminds me. The premise reminds me a little bit of kind of like Final Fantasy VI.
okay,
Have you ever
I've never
that?
played it.
Oh, okay, that's the best one.
Okay.
By far. By
Sweet.
far is the best one. But yeah,
Sweet.
it's kind of they have this. It starts off and there's this girl and there's just kind of all these old gods. I can't remember if what happens exactly, but she somehow there's one girl too. Where she's like, her name's Terra or something. And
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know if that's a play on like her kind of being like Earth or something, and she has like power with the elements or something. So I don't know. But yeah. Yeah, it sounds kind of similar.
Yeah,
But
I need to check that out.
yeah, it's a fun game. It just that takes so long, man, to play through games.
It's fair.
Yeah, because you play through the story, but then they throw in all this side quest stuff too, and you're like, you can get so distracted. But anyway, yeah. So the Bible passage though.
Yes.
So you've just been like interested in that because of the Aunt Alice thing. Or
Yeah.
Or-
So there's sort of this big question for me, and I don't have an answer yet. So, but there's this big question for me, and it's like, what, I want to know sort of more about like what was perceived to be, a metaphysical event with our family, and then what was actually metaphysical. And I think that again, I don't have an answer to this. I don't know like how much of, not how much of it I believe, because I believe all of it. I think that, from all the stories I've heard, I believe all of it. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, so what?
All right, let's hear some stories.
Yeah.
We should do that first. Which ones are you talking about? Because I've heard a lot too.
Oh, have you?
Like
okay.
In the family, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, in
Like
the
that happened
family.
to us. Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
happiness.
Well, not us, I guess per se, but yeah, like our aunts and uncles and stuff. And,
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're wondering what's like. So what's the definition for metaphysical? Because I'm even unclear on that. Someone just told me it's beyond physical. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
I'm
that
gonna say
seems
like supernatural, spiritual,
Okay.
whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. So
Um,
you're kind of wondering what might be psychological and what's what's spiritual, or what do you?
I just it's like one of those. I feel like I'm just doing research. I
Yeah.
feel because like so little is known about Aunt Alice as far as like who she was personally.
Yeah.
Even within our family, that's true, because she was a very private person,
Mhm.
and there was a lot of things that she kept to herself. There are things that I'm still kind of piecing together as far as like
Yeah.
what exactly did happen, and there's a lot of people that I need to interview still, and I feel like there's like I'm only on like scratching the surface with the kind of research I've done. But there's questions for me. Like I want to not prove, that's not a good word. I want to sort of build a case that what was experienced was actually experienced, and that it wasn't sort of a psychological phenomenon, if you see what I mean. So like there's one story. There's one story where Aunt Alice, how far should we back up here? Because there's
You
like a
piqued my interest because
there's
I
a lot
feel
of-
like I haven't heard this one.
you
we can
probably
back up.
have.
So
You probably have.
Aunt Alice we've already ran over that she's gone through. Sorry, that she's our aunt. So she's our grandmother's aunt, right? Our grandmother's aunt, I think.
Correct.
Yeah. So
great aunt.
yeah. So we just kind of had trickled down of stories from her she was a witch.
She was not a witch.
She was not a witch. Okay, that's
So-
what I've always been told.
So that's what I was told too. She was not a witch because she wouldn't have considered herself to be one. She practiced witchcraft and sorcery and the occult, but it was not. She wouldn't have considered herself to be a witch.
Magician, maybe? Or what
No,
would you-
she wouldn't have put a title on it.
Okay.
She practiced it, but she was just a writer,
Okay.
and so it was just something she just did because she had friends who were involved in the occult to certain degrees. I think it came with the fact that she was writing the stories that she was writing, because she was writing about obviously the occult, and Witch World is like the series is about a science fiction world of witches. So it's
Yeah.
like it's something that she had an interest in.
I was told that she was like a leader of the Wiccan community or something in Murfreesboro.
Okay,
Is that
that could be true. I'm
I-
gonna have to find out.
Okay.
I have not read anything about that at this point.
that's what I heard. I think Aunt Mary told me that.
Did she?
If you want to, yeah.
Aunt Mary knows everything, so she probably.
You could. I mean, you could
knows.
ask her. I think she told me that.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's true, but I didn't know if that necessarily is even considered a witch thing, or if it's just more skirts the magical realm or spiritual realm.
It's in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sort of in the same kind of category. I mean, it's not the same. It really depends on who you're asking.
Yeah. It seems like there's so many different variables and stuff.
There are, and I think that even saying someone practice witchcraft can mean 1,000 different things. But so
Some people practice herbalism, and then they're considered
Sure.
witches.
Yeah.
I mean that's like there's one podcast I found. It's called The Green Witch, and it's just she just talks about like dandelions, and I'm like, but it's literally like she's reading a Wikipedia page. I shouldn't say that. No, this is all recorded.
Oh
It was-
no!
I'm like bashing it. No, it was like it was. I followed it because I was interested because I was like, oh, this is an herbalism thing, but it's
Yeah.
titled The Green Witch, but it's just all about herbalism. But it's
Which is probably a reference
yeah.
to the fact that Puritans were, calling people who could do herbalism witches, and that was a thing that did happen. So I guess that's probably where it's kind of coming from for
Yeah.
her for the title. It's probably tongue
To
in
be
cheek.
fair, I only listened to one episode,
Okay.
so it could
No,
have been.
we know
a
you
little
hated
weird.
it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
okay. Just
Yeah.
love it. It's fine. Just own it.
Yeah. So, anyway, but yeah, so there's a lot that goes into that. So you're not sure. You're gathering information about her, but it's also kind of reaching to personal questions, I guess.
All the above.
Yeah.
I would love to speak to one of her friends because they knew her better than her family did.
That's how it feels to me too, because she kind
But I don't know how to get in contact with them. So my next course of action, there's a couple of folks that are involved with her estate. So those are probably the next people I'm going to check with.
does she have friends still alive and around?
That's what I want to know.
Okay,
I don't
you're
know.
not sure yet.
Am I
Okay.
supposed to? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how to find them. So I'm going to check with her estate first, and then move
So
on
what
from
information have you gathered?
there. So I've only interviewed one person so far, which is Nan.
Okay. Yeah.
Who was arguably the closest that we've had to her because she knew her the longest. And then I've done a lot of research into like autobiographies, and then I found a couple of research papers and that kind of stuff.
Okay,
So
yeah.
it's a lot of third party kind of things.
Yeah.
I want to do more interviews. This has just kind of been an ongoing project, so it just
Yeah.
depends on who I can find and who's available and that kind of thing. So we're probably going to interview a couple of the uncles at some point because they probably have a pretty good recollection of her and some of these events. So
Yeah, when I talked to my dad, he said that she was never mean or anything. He was like, she was always
Yeah.
nice and
Mhm.
but he did. But I mean, that's kind of in our family, at least. That's what she's known for, is getting into like being nice, but then still being like getting into a lot of spiritual stuff that you don't really want to mess with.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I'm gonna give a brief little overview here. So when Aunt Alice was getting a little older, she's decided to move down to Florida, and she and her mom moved down to Florida to be closer to Nan and her family, which is like your
Yeah.
dad and our uncles and stuff. And so when she moved down, she was there, and she kind of got more involved with our family, and that's when sort of the chapter opened up with her, and when we kind of had more experience with her, because up until that point she was kind of a distant relative, like not that distant, like she's like Nan knew her fairly well, but it wasn't as close as it was when she moved down, because she moved nearby, and they got more involved with her, and she was involved with sort of a selection of things that her friends kind of got her into, and so it was, kind of like hexes and reading occult books and things like that. And so she was involved in a lot of that kind of stuff and running with those circles. And when she was doing that, she eventually started bringing in kind of these, I guess you'd call them relics. I think that's probably a good term for them. But she was bringing in these relics, and she was giving them to the aunts and uncles. So our family, she was kind of bringing them into their household. So she's giving the kids like a host of stuff, including books. And I think the books were really probably the worst of them, because there's a lot of like occultics, like spell books and things like that. And she was just giving them to the kids. And I think really, I mean, I don't think there was any ill intent. And I think that's
Yeah.
key, because there was really no ill intent to what she was doing, which I think is almost scarier to me, where it's like she was just kind of so ingrained in the whole thing that when weird stuff started happening, and I don't know all the stories yet, and I'm still kind of collecting those, but like there were like fires that would just start and put themselves out randomly in the house.
Yeah.
The
Curtains.
The curtains would catch on fire. There were kids that were knocked over and things were moved. One of the stories were that when one of the uncles, I don't remember.
Uncle Mark, probably, right? Was it the bookshelf?
He was the bookshelf. Do you know that story?
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us about that one?
So it was like my dad's told me this a bunch of times. So
Okay.
like because he said to him it was the weirdest thing, because there was, I think he said the wall was concrete or something. I don't know. There were these metal bars that were anchored into the wall.
Yeah.
And there's bookshelves on them, just these boards. And they got home, and the metal bars they weren't pulled out. They were actually bent down. Like someone had gone, some like Hercules type man had gone in and just bent the bars down, and all the books were all over the floor and had fallen. That's what I've heard. So.
Interesting. That's different from what I've heard.
It
That's
always
good.
is, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
Like, it seems weird.
that's the thing. 'Cause I'm like, okay, how much of this is like, I don't want to say how much of it is real, but that's because I think that everyone really believes this stuff, and I think that there's also this sort of like, how much of it is fact and how much of it is recollection. Where it's like been talked up for so many years that it's like it's just a little bit different every time we tell the story. Because I don't think any of it was written down, and I think that would have been really helpful for someone like me who comes back in like years and years later, and I'm trying to like kind of put all this stuff in writing.
And when you probably remember like one main detail is probably because I think Nan's version is, I remember something about a beer bottle being connected or some sort of bottle, right? Okay.
That's the version that I know. So which uncle was it? You said
Uncle
it was
Mark.
Uncle Mark.
Yeah.
When Uncle Mark was a kid, he was collecting bottles. Kids do weird stuff like that, where it's like they just start collecting things. And so he used to collect these beer bottles, and he would line them up on his shelves next to his books and stuff. So then one day, whenever everyone was out of the house, no one was home, they come home, and then Mark was like, what's with my room? Like, why did someone like move all the stuff off my shelves? And they were confused because like no one was in the house. And so they go into his room, and all of the beer bottles are all on the floor, and they're all just kind of lined up and just kind of standing up, and all the books are off the shelf except for one, and the book is called Poltergeist.
Oh, okay.
And so that's the only, and it was an occultic book about poltergeists. That's as far as I've told. I haven't looked up the book. I don't know what it actually is, but that's what I was told it was. It's an occultic book about poltergeists and how to summon them and cast them out and that kind of stuff.
What is a poltergeist?
That's another word for ghost.
Okay, just another word for ghost.
Yeah, it's another word for ghost. Which is
fancy ghost.
And the word poltergeist is also very important, because when all this stuff was happening, Nan was talking to Aunt Alice about it and said, all this stuff that's been happening, and Alice said, well, what you have in your house is poltergeist. So there's a weird little connection there, and so she's like, okay, this is what you have in your house, and then so she brought in a friend. This is one of her friends, and it was a woman who was working at one of the universities in Florida, and I don't remember if Nan gave me a specific university name, but it was one of the universities in Florida, and she came in, and this woman was a professor of some like paranormal studies. It was something weird. It was like some sort of weird kind of hokey sort of a thing. So she came in, and that woman was less than helpful, I would say. But that's one of those things too, because it's like, I wonder how much she believed in this stuff, and how much of it she was just kind of playing along with, making money off of it, maybe just doing it for fun. But she came in, and so she was like, okay, so let's talk to the ghosts in the house and let's see what they have to say for themselves. And I'm probably gonna botch this story up. I have to really go in and
Yeah.
collect everyone's sort of recollections of it and then rewrite it and make sure
Yeah.
everything I get it from all angles, and I'll know it a lot better at that point. But essentially what happens is she comes in and she's like, she's like, okay, we need to talk to the spirits. And so they do like a seance around the dining room table. And the so the ghosts talk to her. At least she claims the ghosts talk to her, and the ghosts tell her that it is a father and son who used to live in the house, and they somehow died in the house, something like that. And when the Nan and her family moved into the house, they were changing things and they were fixing stuff and they were doing all this stuff, and they weren't happy about this. The ghosts were not happy about this. And so the medium was like, "Do you want me to explain that you're the new tenants and all this stuff, and talk to the ghosts for you?" And they're like, "Okay, I guess." And so she talked to the ghost, and she said after that conversation, that the ghosts now understand, and so it'll be okay from now on.
Yeah.
And
Was
Nan,
it?
well, Nan said she was starting to get a really weird, uncomfortable feeling at this point, which I mean, I would assume she probably would after having a seance and a crazy
Yeah.
medium in her house. I don't think she's a real medium, but so this woman was there, and so the woman was like, "Okay, great. Well, everything's good." And then she says, "Hey, kids, have you ever seen a table rise up? Have you ever tried lifting a table?" Which is this is the one detail which is kind of in my head, because this is something that I've learned about doing some research that has stuck with me a little bit, and I'll get back to that in a second. But she says, "Okay, let's lift this table, and we'll call on the spirits, and then they'll lift the table up for us." And it's like, "Ooh, okay." So all the kids put their hands on the table, and she's about to lead them into this thing, and then Nan gets this like message from God. She said it's the only time she's ever like felt like she ever heard from God, and it was this kind of still small voice sort of a thing, and he told her that all this is happening so that way it would take them away from Christ. Like it would, like all this stuff, all this spiritual weird stuff is happening, and it's destroying the family. And it was this awakening moment. And as this voice said this to Nan, the woman tried to lift the table, and she couldn't get it to lift. She tried to call on the spirits to lift the table, and the table didn't lift. So really interesting little story. And that's when our family sort of came into Christianity, was through this experience. And then they joined a Pentecostal, I think it's the Church of God, and that's when they started sort of cleaning house, is the Pentecostal term, where you go in and you pray over it, and you anoint with oil and do all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's when things actually stopped.
Okay,
happening.
so it didn't stop when
No,
the
the medium was, I don't think she was actually,
not legit.
I don't think so. I think she
Yeah.
was just kind of screwing around. And the reason why I say that is because of the table thing. If you look at a lot of the old like Victorian sort of medium tricks, that they would do to sort of like fool people, like the psychic things. One of those tricks is the whole table lifting thing, where it's like you get the spirits to lift the table. Well, what you're doing is one person is placing their hands over the table, and then another person is shifting it with their foot. So usually you would have another person who is moving the table with their foot, so that way it feels like it's rising up, the table's rising up to meet your
So if
hands.
that were the case, why wouldn't the lady just do that?
And that's the question.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Huh.
Because in theory, she should have been able to do it, unless the table was, I don't know what the table's built of. Like it could have been like really heavy wood and she couldn't move it. And so that's why she got frustrated and couldn't get it to work. Maybe she really did believe that it would work. And so maybe there's something to it. That's what I want to find out. I'm interested in her as kind of like this weird little anomaly, where it's like she's almost like this sort of blend, where it's like we have like this sort of spiritual, supernatural stuff that is happening, and like we have a lot of stories about that. And then there's just also this other person who represents sort of like this sort of fraudulent side of the whole thing. And it's like, she doesn't seem real, and I don't know how she got into this mess. You know, it's like, how did she get into this story? But at the same
Hmm.
time, we have stories like in the Bible, and it's like we had a medium call up
Yeah.
Samuel, so it's like it can be done,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it's just
Balaam.
like, unless of course, you know, you look at that story and you say, okay, well, who's telling this story? Who wrote this story down? How true is that story? And that gets into a whole different
Samuel. It
mess
was
of
it
weird.
was the ghost Samuel. He
He
came
wrote
back
it
and wrote
down.
it down. Yeah, yeah. It's
Um,
called Samuel.
yeah, well,
The
it's
Book of
like
Samuel.
it's like sort of the same thing where it's like, is Job a real person or is he?
See, I kind of think Job is like an archetype, but
I think he's
I
an
don't
archetype too.
like because his name means is suffering. I think so. He's like the
Is it really?
Yeah, so I
That's
think he's
cool.
the archetype of like the suffering man. So I think he was a real person,
Yeah,
probably because
yeah.
like,
Like he
uh,
was probably real. There's a really solid grain of truth in there,
yeah,
and then over years and years and years of storytelling, it became its own story. So
yeah.
what happened in reality is probably not what happens as it
Uh-huh.
is written.
I see what you're
Now,
saying.
you know, is that the same thing? Is that true for a story like Samuel being brought up by a medium? Was that medium actually faking it the whole time, and was Saul tricked into believing that the medium did bring up Samuel? And is that the story that has been then passed down because that trickery happened and was so effective? I don't know,
Yeah, yeah.
and I'm not saying that it didn't happen. I think it did. I think that it did happen. I think that they
I
did
definitely
bring up
lean to
Samuel,
it happening,
but
and probably through like personal experiences with just weird stuff. But then, um, yeah, I don't know.
yeah.
So what so what are your thoughts on that? Like, where do you lean? Do you think more like that stuff is real? Have you ever had any experiences like that, like supernatural,
Yeah, I've had some weird stuff. Yeah.
good or bad?
Um, blend of both. I think
Yeah.
that I had some experiences with. There's this. Okay, so there's this one time. I'll give you a good story here. So there was this one time. I was probably, God, I can't even remember how old I was. I was pretty young, 11, 12 maybe. Like I was pretty young, but I just had my own room. It was like my own room for the first time, and it was the awesomest thing, right? And
Till you see a ghost.
no, well, so so the way that the room was arranged, there was the bedroom, and then there was this big window, and then right up against the window was my bed, which is already a little unnerving, you know, because it's like you're like right next to the window. But I'm going to bed one night, and this is like Monday night, and I'm going to bed. And for whatever reason, it's like I couldn't go to sleep, and it's probably getting close to like 9 to 10 p.m., 11, and it's getting really late. And I start like hearing something. And I hear this like it's really distant, and it's this eerie scream. And it's like this sort of it's not even like a distress, but it's like a wail where it's like just like sorrowful. And it gets louder, and it gets louder, and it gets louder. And I remember shutting my eyes and turning my back on the window because I'm already a little freaked out because because I can like look out and I can see the yard because like there's a street light, so I can see the yard, and like I can't see anything outside, and I'm getting really freaked out. I was 11 or 12.
Yeah.
And I was like, but of course I'm like too much of a big man to go talk to my parents about it because it's like. I didn't want to seem like a sissy. I just got my own room, and I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm gonna look like a sissy. I don't want to like,
yeah.
I'm gonna lose my room right after I just got it. And so I heard this screaming, and as I was laying there, I had this, I would shut my eyes and I'd have a vision, and it was almost as if I was like, I was looking at the window, that was right at my back, and I had this vision of this woman with gray skin. And she had no eyelids and no lips.
This is so creepy.
And she was pressing her face against the window and was staring at me. And I could not sleep. It was friggin' horrifying.
Yeah.
And so totally freaked me out.
Yeah.
And but of course I wouldn't say anything
Yeah.
because it's my own room, Well, okay, so I was like, that was a nightmare. It won't happen again. It happened the next night, and the next night, the next night. It happened for from Monday through Saturday night, and I was losing sleep, and I was really freaked out. But I still wouldn't tell my parents because at that point I was in too deep. I was like, what if I tell them now? And it's like,
Was this so wait, what was this house? Was this a new house?
this isn't, no, this wasn't, it was in the
Who
Madisonville
was in the
house.
room before you were in there?
I think my parents. We moved rooms a lot. It was a small house. So we moved rooms a lot. I
Huh.
think because I'm
Did
not sure
they-
why we did
Did
that.
they ever experience, or you never talked?
No,
to
they
them?
didn't experience that there.
That's weird. Did you ever talk to them later about it?
Yeah, years later, like when I was in college.
Okay. Sorry, get back to the story.
Yeah,
So
no,
this
okay.
happened over and over.
This happened over. So it happened over many days, and then. So I went to church on Sunday, after not having like slept for several nights.
Yeah.
Like slept well. I mean, I got like a few hours of sleep, but it wasn't a lot. And in church, the pastor was preaching about spiritual warfare and talking about how sometimes you have, these spirits that are going to try to cause you trouble, that are going to, try to sway your faith, or they're going to, attempt to make you miserable. And then he just talked about all this kind of stuff. And then he said, okay, listen, this is what you do if you have this situation. He said, first of all, you pray in Jesus' name. You pray about, this thing is happening, and you cast it out in Jesus' name, and you say, whatever this thing is. And he said, you claim its name if you know what it is. If he says, if it's like this or that spirit, you claim whatever that spirit's name is, then you cast it out in the name of Jesus. And then you pray, and you pray, and you pray scripture, and you do all this kind of stuff. And he had like a couple other things too. And I was like, okay, all right. And like at 11 or 12, I was like, that night I had my Bible, and I was like just praying, and I was like, in Jesus' name, whatever you are, leave, and all this kind of stuff. And it went away.
It went away.
It was like, I was like 6 miserable days, and after that it went away. And I've had a couple more experiences like that.
How do you explain that? Though?
But-
That's what's kind of weird, because you could try
Yeah.
to explain it away, but then the weird coincidence of like, oh, then I prayed, and then it was just gone.
And it was just
I guess
gone.
you could maybe someone could still try to explain that way psychologically.
I think
but
you
I
could.
don't know.
I think you could say,
How vividly do you remember this?
oh, it's super vivid.
Yeah, see, that's what always gets me with these stories too, is because you have those things in your life where you're like I was talking to someone the other day about it. Like, if right now, if I wanted to picture my mother's face, I can't do it. Like, I can't picture every detail. Like, I'd have to pull up a picture or something,
Yeah.
And I mean, I can get like a general thing, but I can't but those experiences, like, I can picture this ghostly face, like, for some reason, like, better than I can that. And it's like, it's just like this clear thing that just sticks out in
It
your
just sticks
memory.
out.
Yeah. I don't know how to explain that either.
And I mean, you could psychologically evaluate it. You can say, well, he was in, and I've tried.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And I think I've gotten it pretty well down, right? The screaming, I want to say, is very similar to a certain kind of bird that is around here. And it only sings at dusk. But when you hear it, it sounds like somebody screaming. It sounds like a child screaming. It's really horrible.
I've heard that noise. I
Okay.
think I've heard that noise. But the weird thing was, I
But-
was out looking for ghosts when I heard that noise, and it was not at dusk. It was the middle of the freaking night. And then
Okay.
it followed me home.
Okay.
Like, I heard it at a park, and then like 10 miles somewhere else, I heard it later that night.
Yeah.
Yeah, the same noise,
Okay.
which is, it could be the bird.
It could be the bird, or it could be something else.
Yeah, I know.
Uh,
I know what you're talking about, though. There's this. Yeah, it sounds like a child
really
screaming
shrill. It
and a
sounds
bird
like a child, yeah.
bird mixed together or
It's
something.
really freaky.
Yeah.
So you could say maybe it's that. But that doesn't explain why it went away after the 6th, 7th day whenever I started
Mhm.
praying. Like, it just went away, and it just didn't happen again. So, and then the vision was really vivid, but I have an overactive imagination anyways, and maybe that's what it is. It's like you could really tear it apart, but
Mm-hmm.
and I think the vividness, I think, is also part of the fact that it was such a formative thing for me, where it's like, this was the first time I ever experienced anything like that, and that was so meaningful for me.
Yeah, exactly.
So-
But then to me, that just makes it more real, because it's like, because now people are thinking about consciousness and they don't know what to do with that. And it's like, if you pull that aspect into it, then it's like, then what do you do with it? It's like, because it was extremely meaningful.
Yeah.
And to say if it was just I heard that before. It's like, you can't really just say something's in a figment of the imagination,
Right.
when you pull consciousness into it.
Yeah.
'Cause it's like, then you're getting a whole nother thing.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. That's weird. It's weird. This is turning into like ghost stories. We're planning on talking about Peter Pan.
Well, Peter
But this is
Pan.
good though. This is interesting. I like this a lot. Yeah. I always like these stories. I think
yeah.
I feel like I almost like them too much sometimes because I'm like, should I really be interested?
I think that there's an important thing, especially for anyone who's ever like experienced something like it, where it's like you have to ask those kind of questions. Like, did it
Yeah.
happen? What does it mean if it did happen? What does it mean if it didn't happen? Like, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for, just the world at large? Like, if this stuff is real, and if it's, if there is active things that are sort of lurking in dark corners, like, what do we do about that? And I think that those are important questions to ask. And then what if those things don't exist at all, and it's all just part of this sort of, I guess you would call it the shadow if you were talking about Jung. What if it's just shadows in your head, and it's just stuff that has lingered through evolutionary means, and we're actually, scared of being eaten, or we're scared of being like,
Yeah.
scared of the elements, and now that we no longer have those kinds of fear, maybe that stuff is like lingering in the back of our heads, and it takes a different form because that's an evolutionary defense mechanism. Freaking, I don't know, man. I'm just
But I would think if you're
researching, looking at that kind of
talking
stuff.
about Jung, he would probably say that that's real, then, right?
I
I don't know. I haven't read any of them, but it sounds to me like he believes in all that stuff. It's
I don't
like
know.
very,
I don't know. I'd have to find out.
yeah, that's interesting.
Jung's fun though. He's really fun.
Have you read a lot of?
I read a lot of him in college. I can't say I remember a whole lot about him now, except that I was really interested in his archetype stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's when I first started like really getting into writing, where I was like, okay, I'm going to do this as a thing. I'm going to make this a thing.
Yeah.
And I started reading up with his stuff, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. And I still kind of am influenced by his work in my writing. You can kind of see a little flavors of him pop up every now and again. But it's not even like necessarily him. It's like a bastardized version where it's like in my head, and it's like, this is how I remember it, and so I just write it down like that.
Yeah.
So, but that's fun. I like that.
So do you have an intuition on what, like, that whole experience? Like, what do you think, and then what do you feel about it?
What do I think? What do I feel?
Yeah.
Um,
Because like you said, I feel like if you think about it, you can kind of try to explain it away.
Yeah. I like not knowing.
Yeah.
Actually, I love the ambiguity of I don't know if it was real. And I think it could have been, and I think it might not have been.
That sounds so creepy, though. That image you described, the gray-faced lady with no eyelids and no mouth.
When I was in college, I met this guy who he actually just passed away last year, which is too bad. But he had an experience that was kind of similar, and he said that he had a nightmare, and it was the same woman, except she was seated on like this. The way he described it is like this throne of bones or something. Like it was like she was in hell. But it's the same thing: gray skin, no eyelids, no teeth, no lips. So she had her teeth bare the whole time, and it's like you run into people like that who all have like these kind of weird like things, and I feel like a lot of people have those kind of weird stories where something pops up and it just kind of lingers with you. And for him, that was a big thing because he had a lot of those kind of experiences too. But yeah, I wish I could ask him more about that kind of stuff because.
Yeah, I was curious about that because I was thinking actually, like, I wonder if anybody, not that this will get listened to a whole lot, I don't know if it really will, but like if anybody would hear that and be like, oh, I've seen that lady before.
Yeah.
Because I haven't seen that, but I did have another experience where, and I just told someone else's story recently of like seeing the hag, or like, like the old lady hag looking thing, like the lady in Snow White.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then Natalie, I've actually seen her twice.
Interesting.
Once in a dream, once as I was coming out of a dream, and she was like right in my face.
That's
horrifying. But then Natalie actually said something about she had some nightmares. I don't know if it was just one, but it was the same lady, and because she was describing it like we're like, yeah, that's the exact same lady.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's kind of, I don't know what to do with that either, because I guess you could maybe try to say it's some weird. But then even if you say it's some weird collective unconscious of like all humanity, it's like, what are you getting into at that point? It's like, why is that not? And then why is that not real? Because it's like, then it's just very strange. And
Sure. And then you have like the phenomenon of the sleep demon, which has gotten a lot of sort
Oh,
of a meme culture stuff at this point, where it's like,
the
if you are,
what is that called? I can't even remember.
if you
Sleep
are,
paralysis, right?
if
Is that
you're,
what
yeah, if you're in
okay.
sleep paralysis, and it's like, which I've experienced before, and I've seen the critter, and it looks like a little goblin or something, and it like doesn't, I couldn't see it directly. It would just sit right out of my periphery. But it only happened once, and it's like
I've seen the critter.
I've seen the critter. I don't know what you'd call it, but yeah, it's like in the way people describe it, and it looks like this little, like for me, it was like this little gray, like gargoyle goblin looking thing, and it would just sit out of the corner of my vision up in the ceiling, and it's like, okay, but like a zillion people have seen that before, and I don't know how to explain that. That is so weird that like a lot of people have seen that, and so that to me is like, okay, that's some sort of psychological something that has to be, unless there's like a, it's like a demonic thing and like things follow you around. I don't know. But
could it just be like, because in my mind, I would think if it's affecting your, like, even if it's psychological, it's affecting your consciousness, and then it's not part of you, like you saw it out here.
Yeah.
It's like a separate consciousness. It's not part of you.
Right.
I guess you could maybe, I don't know. It's weird because I guess some people might try to say you pulled it up from your subconscious, but then I'm like, I don't know. I just kind of have this weird. I don't know if you've experienced that, where there's this where you can kind of tell when something's inner or outer. Can you do that at all? Or does that sound weird?
I would say so. I think that's taken practice. And that's sort of like the big question, I think, for me, because it's like, how much of this is a matter of sort of a collective unconscious, sort of like what we talked about before, where it's like, what if this is something that is inside and it's a psychological thing, or what if this is my own sort of spiritual, physical self? Like, what if, one of the things that you hear about sometimes in Christian circles is like, sometimes you'll have this horrible feeling that'll come over you, and it'll make you like really angry, and you don't know why it's making you angry, and it'll really eat at you, and you're just angry with other people, and they're angry back at you, and it's like this big mess. And it's like, well, sometimes that's probably just because, you're all in a high stress situation, because usually that's when those stories pop up, is like, it's usually has to do with something involved with ministry, or it's something critical, or something, that needs to be happening. So maybe it is a high stress thing, or maybe it is like a spiritual attack, and it's hard to say what it is. You just kind of have to feel it out. And I would say, I mean, it sounds a little weird, but like, take it as a scientific sort of a thing. So you try something out and you say, okay, what is causing this issue? And you say, am I hungry? Am I hangry? We'll start there.
Yeah.
No, that's good. I think we're good there. And then you go down the list to say, okay, have I had any sort of like mood swings lately? Have I, and you go through like a psychological evaluation and say, is any of this the case? Like sometimes I'll wake up in a bad mood, and really that's probably just chemicals in my head. Like that probably has nothing to do with anything else than just I wake up and I'm in a bad mood.
Yeah.
Or your diet's bad or whatever. And so like, you got to go through that sort of checklist. And if like you have no other answers, like probably it's like something on the outside. So I don't know. That's not really a great answer. I like the ambiguity of not knowing. So
Yeah.
it's like, we'll try it out. We'll try stuff.
Yeah, I definitely. I think personally, I believe in all of it. So
Yeah.
like I'm probably sounding like, even whereas Christians would say, I think, because it seems like a lot of times in like you mentioned in Christian circles, it's either one or the other. It's very black and white, like either angels or demons.
Right.
And I'm like, I think there's all of it. I believe there's other separate consciousnesses and everything. And then, so I would believe in jinns and fairies and all that stuff. And I'm like, it's from my understanding, a lot of those are just like mischievous or something. I mean, they're not good, but they're like, whereas most people would probably call them demons, I think.
That is an interesting point. I think that also has to do with sort of a Puritan understanding of the spiritual realm. Because if you look at like traditional Puritanism, or if you look at sort of like the Catholic side of things, there is just angels or demons. Like there is no really in between for a lot of things. And I think you're right. I think there is sort of this in between. I think that there has to be.
I feel like there has to be too, because I'm like, there's okay, so I had these. I mentioned this the other night, but I can go into more detail. These three spirits last year. It's kind of like, it kind of sounds like the Scrooge movie, but they showed up. I can't even remember if they were in my dream or if I woke up out of my dream, because
Okay.
I was in my bed and I was laying in my bed. So I think I was dreaming, but I was dreaming like in my bed, and they were just at the foot of my bed. And I remember the first one looked like a little child, very creepy though, and he had this hood up, and like it was like kind of this dark maroon, blood red like hood, but so dark it was like almost black sort of, but you could tell it was red.
Yeah.
So then can't remember if I could even see his face, but he was short, and I think from what I remember it was like, kind of like a child, probably around like maybe 10 or so, maybe
Okay.
6 or 10, six, between somewhere in there.
Okay.
And then the second one was very tall, very thin, very ghostly, and like a whitish blue, and
Okay.
was extremely creepy. Like, I don't know why. You think the first one would have creeped me out more, but for some reason the second one, like, it had a feeling that went with it, which is really strange too. Like, it wasn't like just an image. Like, there was like this I don't know how you describe it. This feeling that went along with it. And so that one freaked me out. And then the third one, I don't even remember. And I didn't even
Really?
really try to remember it, because I remember it was like so terrifying, like way beyond more terrifying than the first two. That's all I can remember, is that it was, I like when I looked on the third one, it was just like overwhelmingly terrifying. And then I don't associate them even necessarily bad. Like, I just kind of think those things can even be sent from God as warning, which is probably very wrong to say. But I'm like, if you look at Abraham in the Bible, it said he had this dream and he was like in a terror because he was dreaming about all the children being carried like in bondage in Egypt and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so God was actually speaking through that. Then you got this other weird scenario in the Book of Kings where God sends out a lying spirit to do his like bidding for him.
Yeah.
Or at least that's how this prophet describes it, which
Yeah.
he could just be describing it in some poetic language, right?
Right.
But then at the same time, all these other prophets are lying. So it's like, obviously there's some sort of like, it's hard to say it, because like the way I used to perceive like when people would say spirits is not quite the same anymore, because
Yeah.
you'd be like, oh, there's a lying spirit, and you kind of pictured this like ghost thing floating around touching
Sure,
people.
sure.
But it's like, no, there's just like this. It's like people are just picking up on this. This is I thought of an example, but it would be really bad to use probably. But you can kind of feel that stuff when you're in the room. Like if you go in a room and there's this tension in the air or something, like that could, like this spirit of, I don't know if you'd call it anger or something, but you can kind of pick up on those things sometimes.
Yeah.
But then this spirit of flattery, I guess, that people,
Okay.
like like the example I was going to use is you pick it up in prophetic circles a lot in Christianity, is where they're just kind of saying what feels good
Yeah.
and not really, so, which was what was happening to Ahab in that story, is like everybody was like, oh no, you're going to win this war. Yeah. And then, he didn't, so he died. So yeah, but that weird story that that gets told in that is that God, the spirit, all these spirits come before God, and God says, "Who's gonna convince Ahab to go die?" Do you know the
Wow.
story?
No.
Oh, okay, it's in Kings.
Okay. Need to reread it.
I'm trying to think of So it's after the necromancy thing, whatever, where
Okay.
the Samuel thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the story is Ahab, like he's with Jezebel, he gets all this stuff, and he murders this guy for his vineyard.
Yeah.
And then he's gonna go out to battle, and all his prophets, he has like 400 prophets of Baal that are like Jezebel's prophets, basically,
Right.
and they're all like, yeah, you go up and win, you're gonna win, you're gonna kind of just flattering him, like you don't need to repent, you'll just win this war. And then he's with the king because he's the king of like Israel, because that's after the split, and so but he's teaming up with the king of Judah, and the king of Judah is like, well, isn't there a prophet of God we can call on? And he's like, well, there's this one guy, Micaiah, I think, and he says, he's one prophet of God, but I hate him because he always prophesies bad thing about me. And then so they go ask him, and he basically says, and he says it in a weird poetic way. He says, I saw all Israel scattered on the mountains like sheep that have no shepherd. And Ahab's like, and he, To me, yeah, like now I know what that means. I wouldn't have at first, but it's basically they like the shepherd gets killed, so he's
Right.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
he's like, see, didn't I tell you? He never prophesies good about me. He's just saying I'm gonna die, and then after that is when he goes in this thing, and he's like, I saw the Lord seated on his throne, with all the hosts of heaven standing by, and he said, I guess God asks like, who will go up and persuade Ahab to go into this war and die, basically. And so that he's like, I saw this spirit come forth and this spirit come forth. And then finally a lying spirit came forth. And he says, I will persuade him. And God says, in what way? And he says, I'll go forth and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And he says, go forth and do it, or something like that. And so then they gets mad at the prophet and locks him up. But yeah, it's just weird because God sends this lying spirit.
Yeah.
And then he also sends a distressing spirit on Saul.
Yeah.
That whole thing. So like God, the weird thing is I don't know that they're of the Lord, but they're from the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the weird thing. Like that's what I'm unclear about. Like I wouldn't necessarily say they're of the Lord,
Right.
but like Saul being distressed, the correct response probably would have been to him further seek the Lord.
Right.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so
Which he
but
was not. of
but
course.
he's still that spirit. It says it was from God. So it's kind of like there's all these bad, or we would probably say bad spirits. Like if I was in a church service and there was this distressing spirit or something, people would just try to probably, instead of considering it, they'd probably just try to be rid of it.
Get rid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I kind of believe in like all those middle things, I guess, that probably are normally unacceptable, where I'm like, well, they're there for a reason. They exist for a reason. So yeah.
Wow.
I don't know. That's where I'm at. But
Okay. I like
yeah.
that. That's cool.
Which kind of, I don't know why that brings in fairies, but I like believing in fairies. So,
I'm with you,
Why
man.
not?
That's cool. That's cool. I like brownies pretty well too. We'll
brownies
go.
are great.
They're cool.
Yeah. You get to blame them when you lose something?
Yeah.
The brownies took it. Yeah. They kind of remind me of the borrowers a little bit. What I've read of them.
Okay.
I don't know. Is that correct?
I don't know. I don't know anything about. I don't know anything about brownies.
about them? Oh, okay.
No, I'm just blowing smoke.
Oh, okay. They're like, from what I understand, they're little like supposedly house spirits. And,
Okay.
like they'll steal things sometimes, and they hate clutter. They hate messy houses. So if
Okay.
you have a messy house, then you'll start losing stuff. And that's probably the
Oh.
brownies. I don't know if that's probably the stupite way to describe it.
was-
Like there's probably more. There's a lot more to it to that, I'm sure. But
Okay.
yeah.
It was described to me as like one was an Irish, like one of them was like Irish was fairies and Scots were brownies or something like that. I don't even know if that's true.
Okay. I think Scots have fairies too.
Oh, do they? Okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
What do I know?
I bought some book and it was going through all of them. So I just
cool.
read about, I don't know. I can get it to you sometime.
Sweet.
You can read about
Yeah, I'll
brownies.
check it out. Yeah, I need to do some
might
research.
actually.
You just brought it with you.
I guess I had it in my bag actually because I wanted to keep reading it.
Hey, wicked.
I don't have it with me, I don't think.
Like
No,
it.
I don't. No.
Well,
Anyway.
I'll pick it up from you at some point.
Yeah, so
That's cool.
sorry. I feel like I took that way off course.
No, that's
Back
cool.
to the ghost stories, I guess.
Ghost
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what to do about all that. So, but right now, so to tie all this in, sort of, you're looking at Aunt Alice and
Yep.
all those stories you're getting from her and your personal experiences and trying to think what's real, basically, right? I guess, or
And I'm not even sure that's the actual question to be asking, whether or not it's real. I just want to know if. And see, that's the thing. I don't know what the right question is to ask, because I don't know if asking whether or not it's real is going to be a beneficial question. What I want to
Yeah.
ask is, what is the utility of these stories? It's like, it seems to me that like there is such a, well, there's like a net positive from these stories with her and with experiences with her, with our family, because they eventually came to know Christ, and I think a lot of our families are still strong believers. I would say that's probably most of our family is still strong believers.
yeah,
And I would call that a net positive. And it wouldn't have happened the way that it happened, because if we did not have the experience with her, it wouldn't have happened the way that it happened. And that's not to say that it's all good, because there's a lot of really, nasty things that came out of our relationship with her. But I think that overall it is a net positive. And I want to sort of look at the whole experience and look at it from sort of an outsider insider perspective, because like we're detached from it. You and I, we weren't there, but we've heard all the stories because like our parents were there, and so it's like it gives us sort of an interesting perspective of it, where it's like we're close to it but we're not in it, and so it gives me the opportunity to sort of look at it from an objective point of view and say, what was this exactly?
Yeah, what was going on?
What was going on, and
Yeah.
what is the overall message that I need to be taking from it? And I asked Nan about it a little bit, because I had one of the questions that I asked her was, what is Aunt Alice's legacy for us? Like what is her legacy for her family? Because I think oftentimes when we talk about Aunt Alice, it's like this sort of negative, at least especially from the uncles and those who were there. It's usually a negative sort of thing, and it's sort of a word of warning. It's like this is there's it's usually the same kind of messages of don't mess with this kind of stuff, don't be dabbling in it, and this is what we experienced and this is why we've built our faith. And I think that there's more to it, and Nan talked about it a little bit. She said that she thinks that one of the legacies that we can look at with her is the fact that she was an accomplished writer and that she did all of it by herself. And that was something that was really interesting to me, because she became a writer at a time when it was very difficult to be a woman writer. She paved her own way. She became a very accomplished writer. She was the first woman to be awarded like one of the, I forget which award it was, which is terrible because I've only read it 1,000 times. But it's the first sci-fi award, and she was really involved with starting up the sort of like the fantasy community of women. Like it was all like she was ingrained in all that, and she mentored a bunch of women writers and brought them up, and she did so many good things. And sometimes I think it's easy for us to forget about the positive impact that she had on a lot of people, because the only stories we've heard are all the awful stuff.
And then what you're saying now too is even the awful stuff is ultimately a net positive.
It has been.
Yeah, or at least for us, I guess.
It has been net positive. Again, there's a lot of really awful stuff, and some of it we can't really talk about on a podcast, but and
so the cat story, because I already have that.
No, not the cats. No. Other stuff. But
like Aunt Mary told that one on the podcast.
Oh, did she?
Yeah, she did.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I was.
It's fine. I mean, I didn't mind.
We're not going to tell the cat story because I was told not to tell the cat story. But I will say this, that I'm not going to say that. I'll say it anyways. Yeah, I was retold the cat story. But I had to turn off my recorder while I was being told the cat story. So we're not talking about that one today.
Well, it's already out there if Nan wants it secret. It's already on the other podcast.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Aunt Mary.
Okay. I am not to be blamed for this.
No. This was before you interviewed Nan, I think. Right.
Okay.
Shortly before, I think I interviewed Aunt Mary. And Aunt Mary told the cat story, so it's out there.
I need to listen to that.
Yeah.
That's gotta
be. You do. Be good.
You
probably get some good, or you could call her. She'd be willing to do it, but she's got a lot of interesting stuff about Aunt Alice, and that's like you said, it's from one person, so it'd be nice to talk to her friends also.
Yeah.
Because
if we can find them.
Yeah, what Aunt Mary said. One thing that intrigued me honestly the most is because I grew up in charismatic circles and everything, and I do personally believe in tongues, and I'll still pray in tongues sometimes. But she said that Aunt Alice would actually do that, but pray to not direct it in an intention to God, at all, but direct it more in an intention to just spirits realm. Yeah, just spirits.
That's interesting.
Any spirits around her. So what Aunt Mary told me was like she was probably casting spells per se on the family and didn't even know or something,
Interesting.
Because she didn't know what she was praying. She was praying something into, which is kind of what you're doing when you're speaking in tongues. You're offering up your language, your speech, in an unknown way. Like I think it says that in Corinthians, you don't know what you pray when you're in tongues. But I think it's where you direct your attention, and
Sure.
Yeah, and so she was. So I mean, I don't know, but then that's you kind of got to think about that too, though. If she was attending, like intending to do something nice and praying in tongues, like why would all this bad stuff happen? I don't know. I don't know. It was interesting,
Yeah.
and I never heard of that actually happening outside Christian circles. Like I didn't know actually like occult practices had a
Sure. Well, and she was a Christian.
Aunt Alice.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
She grew up. I believe she grew up Catholic. Is what I was told. Now
I didn't know that.
I got to double check on that, but she grew up a Christian, and so
Did she always believe or no?
it's,
It's hard to say. Well, yeah, it's hard to say with
I
anybody.
don't know.
Okay.
It's hard to say with anything with her. There is one story that I read about. I asked Nan this. I probably shouldn't have. She's cool though. She's totally. So there's one story that I read about with Aunt Alice, and this is totally left field. This is gonna be like way off. Where one of the guys there's a guy who was running a website for Alice and was selling her books for her through this website. And he wasn't part of the estate. He was kind of separate, but he kind of was, adopted into the estate as being like this sort of keeper of her archives. Unfortunately, his website's crashed, but that's a different story. I want to reach out to that guy. I need to find out what he's up to. Anyway, so this guy, he did an interview at some point, and one of the interviewer's question was, "What is the most surprising thing you learned about Alice Norton?" And he said that he didn't know Aunt Alice terribly well, but one of the things that he learned that he thought was interesting was that Alice kept this shoebox full of Victorian porn, like nudie photographs and stuff. And that she would she would pass it around to the ladies, her friends, during tea time, and they would all laugh about it, which is incredibly bizarre. And I don't know if it's true. And Nan said she had no idea what I was talking about.
That's crazy.
I thought I'd ask. I'm like, do you know anything about this? Because this is really weird. And she's like, no, I have no idea.
Tea time, huh?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Which, I mean, as a writer, I totally can see another writer like getting a kick out of that, where it's just like this fun, like taboo thing to do with your friends. I mean, I wouldn't do it, but it's I could see where she's, where she would be coming from, because it just seems like a weird, quirky thing.
So when you write your stories, how do you do that? Like, do you kind of try to go into some sort of imaginal realm or like a different mental state, sort of, or no?
Ooh, it's a good question.
'Cause I'm trying to. I was just kind of curious if there's a link here, if like that's where Aunt Alice did that and produced so many books.
Where it's like part of the creative process.
Yeah, and you're opening up, because I feel like you're kind of opening up a door and letting in these, almost like trying to receive. What do people call it? Your muse, your genius, or something? It's like you're trying to receive an imagination or a story almost from outside of you or something.
Sure. And this may bleed into another conversation, or a little topic we could possibly have, which is about the ethics of writing about something that is real and dangerous in such a way that it's fun, where it's like Aunt Alice wrote about witches, but then she was also practicing witchcraft, which became like a sort of a dangerous thing for our family, and became more than a nuisance, but also just kind of destructive. And that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, it depends on what I'm writing. So I have two projects that I'm working on now. One of them is based on characters, so it's like I'm writing from 4 perspectives, and they're in first person.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm writing from each perspective. So I'll just kind of get into a character, like stepping into their shoes, and then I'll write from their perspective.
Yeah.
Which is a lot easier for me than you would probably think. I can just sit down and just start writing, because I know them well enough where I can just go and write the story. There's a second story I'm working on. It's actually partially out right now, but that's a different subject. But that story is written by a narrator, so it's all third person, and the narrator is sort of he's telling you this story as though you're watching like a psychological crime study. And so he's telling you things about, you've read the first couple chapters of it, where it's he's telling you all these things that are happening, and he's like describing it in such a way where it almost feels like you're kind of reading like a crime report. And that one is a little bit more difficult to write, but I have to just kind of sit down and start thinking in the voice. And as soon as I get the voice going, it just takes me a minute or two listening to some jazz or whatever, and I get the voice. It's like,
Nice.
let us now look into her window.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to find our subject sleeping
Yeah.
under the covers. Let's get her day started. And it's like that kind of thing. And yeah, usually it doesn't take much for me. I've been writing for so long, I can just flip a switch and it goes.
Yeah.
Which is pretty handy.
So would you personally think there's any danger to that?
To flipping a switch? No, because it's like you exercise a muscle. And it's like muscle memory. So like, I've done dancing for a while, and it's like, if you do a move long enough, you remember the move, and so it's like you can do it without necessarily thinking about it. Well, when you write, it's the same sort of thing where it's like if you get into a mindset and you start using your imagination in a particular fashion, you start laying this groundwork, and you have almost a muscle memory where you can just go back to that place, and you can just start doing whatever you need to do.
But it's almost like, it seems similar to me as kind of like method acting or something.
It'd be similar. Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be similar.
Yeah. So, but is that, I guess that was my question. Like I have no opinion one or the other. I just have no idea. I didn't know if that is like, because you're kind of trying to step into another, I don't know if consciousness is the right word, but a different personality, I guess.
Sure.
Other than yourself.
Sure.
Is there any, do you think there could be, I guess, possibly a danger in that? Like where you would, because I think that maybe that, I don't know if that would be an argument against like Aunt Alice, some of the other crazier stuff she got into. Like maybe, I mean, I have no idea.
The difference, I think, is in the method of research.
Yeah.
Because if you are reading about the occult, and you are writing about the occult, and you're telling stories that have to do with the occult, that is a different ball game from practicing the occult. And I'll make a reference here. One of my all-time favorite dudes is Sir Christopher Lee, who he played like Saruman and that guy. So before he was old, when he was old too, but like before he was old, he like got his start playing all these like B movies, and he was into the occult scene with the B movies. He was always like Dracula, or he played Dracula like a zillion times, and then he played like Satanists and all this kind of stuff. And he was constantly asked about this, and he said that there is a big difference between acting something out and then practicing it. Because he always said, this is his big thing, he said, do not ever practice the occult, because you will immediately regret it. You will lose your soul. I think we do the voice. You will lose your soul.
Yeah.
And that was his big thing, because there was rumors, and this is totally kind of a tangent here, but there were like a zillion rumors about him, and like the press started talking him up, and they were like, oh man, this guy has like a library of occult books, and he's like really into all this stuff, and he was constantly asked about like his library of occult stuff, and he was like, I never had a library of occult books. I have 5 books. And he said 3 of them were gifts.
Yeah.
2 of them, I think all 5 of them were actually gifts, and then 3 of them were gifts from one of these guys who did like occult crime kind of novels, sort of things. Weeding? I don't remember his name. But he turned out to be a kind of a friend, but he always said like those are the only books I ever had because they were gifts. But I would never dabble in the occult because it's dangerous and you'll lose your soul. And I think that that's kind of the difference, is like if you are creating art requires a certain amount of I don't want to say danger, but it requires a certain amount of risk on the part of the storyteller, where you have to kind of put yourself in a mindset that is outside of what you would imagine to be ethical or safe. And I think that there is some risk to that, and you have to have a really good, stable grounding. And we've seen before where like people push themselves too far, and they aren't as grounded as they need to be, and that's why you have like rampant drug use and alcohol use with actors, and it's like it's a coping mechanism, and that is a problem.
Huh.
But I think it's part of creativity is having a certain amount of mental psychological risk. But I don't think I don't think the danger is necessarily the research or the telling of the stories, but it is in specifically the practicing of
Yeah.
and the engaging with and the believing in the occult, which was a problem. And that was another question I asked Nan too, and that was something she mentioned, which I thought was interesting, because she said, these books that Aunt Alice had written, of course, a lot of them are about, witches and things.
Yeah.
And she said, these books are probably like perfectly fine, and most people can read them and not have any problems reading them. Like, it's not going to affect them in any way, because it is fantastical and it's,
Yeah.
it's fiction, but it means something to us because, we knew her, and that's the difference, because we knew what she was into, and we've experienced that. And I think that's kind of an interesting take on it too, because there is a certain level where it has to be fiction. Like, it's not all real. Like, there's a certain amount of it where it is fiction in creativity. So
Yeah.
yeah, it all kind of bleeds together, I think, in a way.
Yeah, it really does. it gets kind of strange. That's man. Yeah. I was just curious. I know we should probably wrap it up here, but cuz I agree with, like, I think I agree with you with the observing and studying thing. I think why I was asking was because of, you hear of like method acting, and then is that kind of, but the one actor you're saying he warned against, don't practice it, but then you hear of other actors where, like, so I don't know if that's true, the whole Jack Nicholson thing and the Joker thing. Have you heard that, where
No.
he warned Heath Ledger, like, don't take this role, it'll make you crazy.
Oh, okay.
And then
I don't know.
and then I don't know if any of that's true, but then it's like, yeah, I don't know, because to me it's just because you're acting it out, and so are you. I guess there's more in acting and writing, though, like
Yeah.
the difference. But in acting, that feels, Heath Ledger's Joker. You've seen those movies, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So when, like, I think of anarchism, like, I don't think that ultimately, like, I don't know that an anarchist actually has, that one can actually exist, and his depiction of the Joker is like the closest thing I think I've seen come to that.
Okay.
But then I'm like, if that's actually a real, like, whatever you want to call it, archetype or spirit of anarchy, if you're actually willingly trying to become that, like, I don't, like, supposedly he didn't, yeah, I think I read somewhere that he didn't, like, that's not the role that killed him. Like, you hear that rumor that it was just a rumor, but it's like, but to me, I'm like, if I was trying to just tear down every hierarchy, like, ultimately you'd have to tear yourself down. Like, so I'm like, I feel like it would just be
Okay.
you're constantly destroying everything. You're flipping the hierarchy over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
You'd lose your mind or something.
Yeah.
So I'm like, if I tried to actually, if I was a method actor and was trying to take on that, I feel like it would be kind of dangerous.
Okay.
Like, I don't know, but I mean, I'm not really sure.
Okay. I'm not sure either. I tend to think it's mostly psychological,
Yeah.
but at the same time, like, I don't know. I don't know. It could be something else.
But it would be, right?
And that's, do you know anything about, like, cursed films? You ever, like, read about cursed films? Like, there's some films that people say are, like,
Wait, what are they?
Okay.
Can you name some?
Yeah, Poltergeist.
Oh, okay.
Actually,
yeah,
is one. That's where
The Ring? No, I'm just kidding.
I don't think The Ring
Yeah.
is. I think. I mean, it could be. I don't know.
Poltergeist.
There's
I
one-
haven't seen Poltergeist.
I haven't seen it either, but there was, like, several deaths and stuff involved
Whoa.
with that movie, and it's like production related stuff, and then,
like during the
little-
production.
there's
deaths?
a
Okay.
couple during the production, and then there's one, like, the little girl who was, like, the lead in the movie passed away soon after the movie came out. So that was one of them. But there's one movie, and I know a little bit more about this one. There's a movie called Incubus. I'm gonna do a video on it. This is one of my YouTube projects for down the line.
Incubus.
Incubus came out in 1966. It was filmed in 65, and it was filmed the year
60s,
before.
Man. 60s.
Well, yeah, it was filmed like months before the original Star Trek series, and I know that because William Shatner was in this movie. There are not very many actors and actresses in this movie. You have William Shatner, and then you have the guy who plays the Incubus, and then you have William Shatner's on-screen sister, and then you have two succubi, which are the female
yeah.
demons. And so in this movie, you
A
have
lot of people don't know this. I'll just explain it because it's weird. I thought this was common knowledge, like the
people don't know
incubus
what
and
they are?
succubus thing. Yeah, and
Okay.
almost like probably 90% of the people I mentioned like succubus to, or something, they're like, "What is that?" And I'm like,
And
so
then you have
it's
to
a-
explain. You have to go
yeah.
awkwardly
So,
kind of explain.
so for anybody that doesn't know, incubus is like the demon male spirit that has sex with women, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Then the succubus is the female spirit that has sex with men. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. And so in the movie, it's they don't like function like the actual myths go, but yeah, so it's like the female succubi are like killing men, and so you have this young female succubi who's like trying to, she's like, it's too easy, I can tempt any man, I need to find a
Yeah.
good man to tempt. And so then here comes Bill Shatner, who's returning from war, and he's visiting this well of youth or whatever.
Bill.
It's a freaking bizarre movie. It's awesome. It's boring through half of it, but the other half's really good. He fights a goat at one point. It's awesome.
That's great.
Okay. Anyways, so that movie is legendarily a cursed film, and so you have Bill Shatner, and he's the only one who came out like completely unscathed. After that movie came out, the guy who played Incubus died in a murder suicide, and the woman, one of the lead actresses, she committed suicide, and then one of the other lead actresses, her daughter, really soon after this movie came out, was kidnapped from her, like the front of her house, was just kidnapped and then like murdered a couple days later. And after this all happens, the movie studio that had made the movie like went out of business after this movie came out. Like just all this stuff. So people are like, "Oh, it's a cursed film," and I'm like, "Well, maybe they're just scraping the bottom of the barrel for all these people who already have these issues, right?"
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the drug use was obviously rampant at the time,
Yeah.
so it's like, who knows?
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, I don't know. So it's just.
It's kind of fun to
It's
think that it's
interesting.
cursed, though.
It's kind of fun to think it's cursed. And it's like, okay, and so did the subject matter have any sort of sway over what actually happened? Or was it that the subject matter sort of introduced the idea that it's a cursed film? Like if it was a movie about like three people who are in a love triangle in like the Swiss Alps, and it's like all like lovey, and like one guy's a shepherd or something. I don't know what they have over in Swiss.
Would they have died?
Would it have been considered a cursed film at that point, even if those people did
even
die?
if they did die.
Yeah. Would it have been as legendary as it was?
If it was a really good film and a nice Christian film in the Swiss Alps, then it would have been an attack of the devil.
Oh, okay. That's absolutely what would have happened.
Because I'm thinking of The Passion right now. Like, have you heard all those stories?
I haven't heard those stories.
Oh, okay.
I briefly read about it.
Supposedly he was struck by lightning multiple times.
What?
The guy who
When he's
played
on the
Jesus,
cross?
I don't know.
Because he's hoisted up, and it's like...
That'd be pretty sad. I wouldn't get up there if it's a thunderstorm. Yeah, I don't know. I've heard that there was a lot of stuff that happened on that. And I've usually heard it said like, something spiritual was trying to stop the production of the film sort of thing.
Or
which
was
could be very true. I don't know.
Or was it a poorly managed production, and that's just a good story that they came up with
Cross
in order
made of metal.
Yeah. And the cross had like metal beams keeping it down or something. Like, I don't know.
I don't know either.
That's the thing. I don't know. I'm a questioner. I just question things. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's probably good to question. Yeah. I don't know, but yeah, it's interesting. Those are interesting thoughts. That would be fun to do though. Talk about some of those cursed movies. Do you have to go, or do you have more time or not? 'Cause we could.
You're in my house. If you want to like hang out and to keep hanging out,
I'm fine for as long as you want. I feel like maybe this topic is kind of wrapping up.
Okay.
But I still. And we don't have to do this next time, but we could start a new one if you wanted to. But I do want to at some point is ask you about that movie, the Annihilation movie.
Oh yeah, that's gonna take a whole.
So we should wait on that one.
We should wait on that one.
Okay.
Yeah, Annihilation's is definitely a favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have some ideas about
'Cause
that one.
I have a lot of questions about that one. So.
Okay, okay.
Or maybe I should rewatch it then ask questions. I guess.
Yeah. That'd be good.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
That one's a curse, probably. By the way.
It could be.
Made me feel awful. No, I'm just
Oh,
kidding.
it did.
No, not really. It was kind of creepy.
It was
though.
a
It kind
little
of creeped me out.
It was a little. It was. I mean, it's very creepy.
Yeah.
That bear scene is probably one of the scariest things I've seen in a long
The
time.
bear scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Freaking.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of like The Revenant.
So.
except with a
Oh,
zombie
I didn't
bear.
see The Revenant.
Oh yeah, just watch the one scene.
The one scene with the bear and the rest
Yeah,
was boring.
yeah,
That's what I keep hearing.
Yeah, I don't know that it was
You gotta
boring,
see the bear
but-
part and just forget the rest.
Yeah, just watch the bear. All right, man. Well, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, man.
I feel like
this has been fun.
it's kind of hard because we get into these type of topics, and I'm just like, man,
Get into
there's
the
so many
weeds.
questions will go through my head, and I can't get them all. and then even like certain ideas, or I'm trying to like articulate my thoughts, and it's like sometimes it's just not there either.
Sure. Well, it's
There's
end of a long day, and we're both been working all day, so it's probably part of it too.
Yeah, I just feel like I'm gonna listen back and be like, man, I should have.
I should ask
this.
that.
I should ask that. Oh yeah, the one thing though that we should probably say, because
Okay.
we've kind of just like mentioned it in passing,
Okay.
and people might be curious, but the curtain thing. So, because you mentioned kind of again that some of these things that started happening to the family that were associated with Aunt Alice and
Mhm.
everything, like were actually destructive. So the curtain thing. Do you want to say what happened? Or
You
want
go
me-
ahead.
Okay.
You go
So
ahead.
basically, it was like I think this is what I heard. I
Okay.
don't know if this is what you heard too. This was kind of the final straw, like kind of broke the camel's back thing. Was all the crazy stuff was happening in the house all the time, and then finally, I think it was they came home one day, or I think they were gone, or maybe they were even there. I don't know. But the curtains randomly, from what I heard, they randomly basically lit on fire, and then they had curtains that went up above the bed, in the master bedroom, I think, and so the curtains burnt up. I was told they burnt up one side, and then went across and burnt down the other side. Like only the curtains burnt, and whereas all the other stuff in the room, like the bed, should have caught on fire, all this other stuff,
Mhm.
but just the curtains burnt up and then went out. I don't know if it did it. Did you hear if it like damaged anything else? Or
I
no?
don't. I heard it was just the curtains.
Yeah.
But again, it depends on who you're asking, probably. Like,
Yeah.
and how they remember it. That's the thing. You got to write stuff down. You got to
Yeah,
write stuff down. That way,
write stuff
that way,
down.
when these little amateur historians like us, we're coming back
Yeah,
in
we're
and
like,
looking at it, like what actually happened, and then like, nobody wrote it down. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, okay.
It is interesting though because even when you hear the stories, there's at least like, and maybe that's what we need to do is gather each one from each person because it seems like there's a commonality to everyone. Like everybody remembers the bookshelf. Everybody remembers the curtains. There's a lot of other little things that seem to be personal. Like my dad's got personal ones that nobody else was there for. But
yeah.
yeah. So it seems like there's little differences, but there's some very, very profound similarities that you're like,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So
cool,
yeah,
man.
we should write them down. Well, now we got them recorded, so we don't have to.
Yeah. Forget it. Forget it. Do I need to say who I am? I don't think we even.
This is Jonah Nelson.
Hi, this is Joe.
I said you were
There
my
at the end.
cousin. I don't
That's
know.
right. Yeah, cousin. I work for a moonshine distillery, and I'm attempting to become a writer. I think that's all. I think
That
that's
sounded
all
very fake,
No,
but you actually do.
But I actually do.
Yeah.
I freaking have had the most Tennessee jobs at this point. It's like they're so Tennessee. Like I worked at a Ford dealership selling trucks. I've worked at a Tractor Supply, a manufacturing firm, and now I work at a moonshine distillery.
That's good. You're moving up.
The only thing left from here is like Smith and Wesson, and then maybe a hat shop,
Yeah,
like cowboy hats. Yeah,
yeah, there you go.
and then I would have hit all the Tennessee stuff.
Yeah, and maybe eventually you could combine all of them.
Yeah.
That would be great. That would be like a great theme park if you could do that.
Oh yeah.
The Ford trucks.
Yep,
and
Ford trucks. Yep, guns, booze,
The hat.
the whole 9 yards. The hats.
There you go.
Yeah, man. Hey, thanks for having me. This has been fun.
Yeah, thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
Great. So
Cool. I don't know. Do you like sign out? What do you
no,
say?
I don't really.
Do you
I
say
don't know
anything
what to do.
cool?
Should I do something? Should I say something cool?
Good night and good luck.